That real need to.
Very insulted.
Hello everybody and welcome to Interview with a Storyteller. Today's guest is the author Karen Spafford-Fitz, and I'm very excited to have her on. She's the author of many books for young adults and for younger readers. And I would also venture to say that it's not just for young adults, they are also for adults who are young at heart, and even if you're old at heart, they're just good books. So I'm really excited to have her on. Thank you, Karen, for coming. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, James, and thank you so much for the nice invitation to be here. I am thrilled to be part of Richmond Public Library's programming with you.
Well, just in case somebody who's watching has just shown up, they're not familiar with your work, why don't you tell us a little bit about your books? I should have actually said if you had any books, you could show us the covers too. But
well, got your back, James.
Excellent.
Got your back.
Over-prepared.
and my back, I guess. So I have 8 books, and you're right, absolutely middle grade. So for 8 to 12 years old. Year olds, and also for 12, 13, and older, up to 18, and as you said, up to infinity for any book lovers, we hope. So yeah, I'm the author of 8 books, and the first one is called Dog Walker, and this was published in 2006, and I'm delighted that it continues to be. I'm just going to reach here. It continues to be re-released, so it's now been released in various forms, the most recent of which arrived just a couple weeks ago, and this is for an ultra-readable form, so it's accessible to readers with various reading challenges or learning challenges. I also wrote a book called Vanish and Unity Club. These are both Orca titles, Orca Book Publishers of Victoria, BC. And they are both, they have social justice themes, which I tend to gravitate toward. I have also written a couple of sort of edgier teen novels, Saving Grad and Pushback, for readers who are 13 and older. And I'm a sporty type, and I just see over my shoulder, if you can look over my shoulder, there's some running medals there. And I have a running book called Taking the Lead, and more recently, Volleyball 5. And I didn't play a lot of volleyball, but my kids did. And wonderful sport. I can't recommend it highly enough, and it deserved a book. And my most recent book from 2021 is Pickpocket, and this is another Orca Book Publishers title, and it is for readers who are 12 and 13 and older. So that's what I've been doing, James. Those are my 8 books.
Wow. So Pickpocket, I know you had started writing before the pandemic started.
Yes.
So you actually got to travel to go research that. Tell us a little bit about the research that you do for. Let's start with Pickpocket and the traveling that you did.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I have to say it was a pleasure. It was just a pleasure. Best research project ever. It took me to the south of France, and actually what had happened is I traveled with my husband to Nice in the south of France, just off of the Mediterranean Sea, quite a number of years ago, and I lost my heart to the place. And it was one of those spots, James, where I went and felt like I maybe lived there in a past life or something. I don't know. I just really, really connected with old Nice, and I started walking. The first day Ken and I were there, I was walking through old Nice, and there was a market, and it was bustling, and people were yelling out their prices and their wares, and it was like this beautiful pandemonium, right? And I looked at it and went, there has to be an adventure story here with a race scene right through here. There has to be some kind of a chase scene. And so in fact, something that was odd for me was the Pickpocket, first of all, did not happen in Canada like all of my others did, but the very first character was Old Nice itself. And from there, I kind of thought about different scenes, different situations, and actually my editor, Tanya Trafford at Orca, she had some suggestions for me. And by the time I had visited there one more time, the story was coming together, and that was when I did quite a lot of research, literally standing in the middle of that bustling market with all the mayhem happening around me, and listening and sniffing and looking, taking in all the sights and the colors with the produce and the flowers and the And there are antique markets there as well, so taking in les antiquités and just enjoying absolutely everything that was a part of that environment. And I tried to work it into that book. So it was a pleasure to research, and something else that I found and that I'm really grateful for is I speak French quite confidently, and so it meant that I was able to talk to people who live there, and I didn't have to rely on sort of secondary resources. I could actually talk to the people. There was a nice cab driver who gave me some great information at one point about the differences between driving a scooter and a motorcycle. And for anyone who reads Pickpocket, and you'll see that's right on the cover, my protagonist Jean-Luc is driving a Vespa, a scooter. And so the cab driver was helpful. There was a lunch spot that my husband and I sometimes went to where they did all these beautiful quiches and wonderful coffees. And Mark gave me lots of information, as did some of his regulars there. So it was just a pleasure being able to do that research. And the other thing I will mention about researching Pickpocket is there's a type of food that is mentioned. It's a street food that's very common along the Mediterranean. In France, it's called soca. And in Italy, which is very, very near to Old Nice, it's called farinata. And the first time my husband and I went to Old Nice, we actually were living above a soca shop. And so I worked that into the story as well. So we were living above a place called Chez Teresa, and I turned it into Chez Rosa. And so Jean-Luc is sent to France, and he is working in his uncle's soca shop while his parents are just trying to keep him out of trouble for the summer. So it was a joy from start to finish to research, and hats off to my husband who took hundreds, probably thousands of research pictures for me. He's a photographer of the two of us. I'm the translator and the one with the journals and keeping the notes, and my husband took lots of photos for me. And so that was how this story came together, and it was a pleasure to write, and boy was it ever fun to research.
Oh, I bet. And okay, so when you say that you took notes in journals, like actual like paper journals, or do you use something electronic, or like how do you do it?
I tend to do it pretty old school. I know my entire writing process tends to be a lot more pen and paper than what I know a lot of my colleagues follow. So for me it was journal and pen. And I'll tell you a funny story about that, James. I was standing in the market one day, and I was just writing what I saw around me, writing down some of the things I heard the vendors call out, and somebody kind of came running after me, and I was making him nervous, bottom line. I suspect maybe he was not completely supposed to be there in France and was afraid that I was a government person. And so once I explained to him that, no, I'm a Canadian author and I'm taking notes to write a book, he, I saw him like visibly relax, and at that point he kind of stopped, chasing me through the market, and we were all fine from there. So for me, pen and paper, there's just no replacement for it. From my point of view as well. I know there are certainly other options, and I tend to keep it pretty old school.
Yeah, I had actually gotten to the point where I was collecting a lot of notebooks and not writing in them. The typical writer thing where, they're so beautiful. You don't want to, it's not the right story for it. It's just too beautiful.
Right.
And then during the last couple of, 18 months or so, me too. I got back into pen and paper and writing in the notebook and really feeling that connection, because I got so tired of being online all the time.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
There are a lot of screens.
Yeah, I didn't want to be on one more screen trying to write, and I found that there's definitely a different feeling in your brain when you're writing on paper than there is writing on the computer.
Yeah, I think there is, and that's the kind of thing that fascinates me as a former teacher as well. I know that some people are really strong learners with auditory, they learn through their ears, others learn through their eyes as viewers, and for me, it's a tactile thing. And my study method all through school, all through university was making study notes, and then condensing them a little bit more and rewriting them, and so for me, there's something about pen and paper that tactile method that just works for me.
That's amazing. And the Vespa too. I remember seeing you posted once a picture of a Vespa.
Yeah.
And I think it was one that inspired the one in the book because you fell in love with it. Have you ever owned a Vespa or have
I have
plans?
not. The closest I ever came is I did put my name in a draw for one at one point, and you know those kind of draws where you wonder if they ever actually happen. But maybe that's just sour grapes on my part because the quick version is I didn't win the Vespa, but and that was a little heartbreaking. But no, I've never actually ridden on one. But I love them. I'm really into design and art and architecture, and to me, just they have this just the coolest retro kind of mid-century modern look to them. And so I gravitate toward Vespas, and beyond saying that, I'm not quite sure why that is the case, but definitely there is a really important Vespa in this story. And the only thing I can really say further about this is that the Vespa is quite important, and Jean-Luc uses it to drive the soca that they've made at his uncle's soca shop over to the market. So it's about a 4 or 5 minute drive, maybe longer, or actually maybe not so long, given how I saw a lot of people driving Vespas and scooters and motorcycles through these winding, narrow little streets, packed with people. But yeah, that is how they used to transport the soca to the market from the soca shop where they make it.
Interesting. When I was in Korea, actually, the same thing. Vespas were used everywhere by delivery people.
Oh.
And I would see there'd be hundreds of people crossing a street, and then the Vespas would just drive through them, and nobody would blink because they're so used to it.
Right.
And whereas here in North America, if that happened, we'd be screaming at them and be careful, slow down. But over there, it's so normal that people know this is how they live, and they have to because that's how they get around so quickly.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and me too. I love Vespas, and it's the whole design. I really, when I was in my 20s, I almost bought one, but just too scared to ride it.
It was just too beautiful. Something could happen to this beautiful piece of machinery, right?
Well, and me.
and you as well, James. I was including that you with beautiful piece of machinery.
Yeah,
so
but,
we need you safe and well.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I know about you too, as you sort of mentioned, having running medals, is that you've gotten really into running.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have, and I've been so inspired, and I really have the right people around me. I have 2 younger brothers, and the middle brother, the one who's just a couple years younger than me, is just a tremendous runner. He's made his livelihood out of Spafford Health and Adventure near Kingston, Ontario, which is my hometown. And up until early New Year, when unfortunately my brother had a health scare and is doing great now, but up until then, he had I'm going to get the numbers wrong here, but he had a 31 or 32-year daily running streak.
Wow.
And and we're not talking just a 2 or 3 mile or kilometer run every day. So it was really significant. So he's coached a lot of people. He's competed at all levels, and I'm the really happy beneficiary of this because I've had wonderful advice. Running advice over the years from my brother Derek. Derek's wife Sarah is also a wonderful runner who really inspires me. And for years, throughout high school, university, I dabbled in running a little bit. I would run for a while, and then I would kind of stop. And what really got me going is about 16 years ago, both of my daughters were running cross country with their school. And so I was going to their meets, driving teams of kids over to the meet and staying to see these events happen. And I just remembered that beautiful race energy that I used to so enjoy when I was watching my brother run in his various races, usually in Kingston, when we were in the same city. And I just decided I wanted to be a part of that. I absolutely wanted to be a part of that. So I got some great advice from my brother about, starting gradually, building up the mileage. I have found now as a runner who is in the 50 and older category, I'm having to work a little bit harder to prevent injuries. I'm having to earn those 5Ks and those 10Ks with a lot more strength work, stretching work, just to be able to keep that going. But But I'm actually really delighted that a couple weeks ago I hit what I call my 16th run-anniversary. So I've had a running practice for 16 years, and I don't run every day like my brother had been, and I think has started doing again, most likely. But 3 times a week, 3 times a week, I'm out on the trails. I have dogs who run with me, so that's part of our bonding time together. And it's really a powerful practice. And I know people speak about that with their yoga and their Pilates, and I absolutely believe that to be true there as well. For me, running just clears my head. It's one of those things that, as well as being beautiful in its own right and freeing in its own right, I can't tell you the number of times I've been struggling with a story idea and thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with this character. There's some inconsistencies, these plot points. I don't know where to go next. And I just step away from the computer, go for a run. We have a beautiful river valley here in Edmonton where I do a lot of my running. And it's funny how you just kind of come back and, I don't know, the pieces just start fitting together again. So it factors quite largely into my life, and I'm so grateful that I fell into that and have those people around me who've really helped make it such a joy.
That's fantastic, because I know there's the stereotype of the writer who just sits on the couch and then sits at their computer and doesn't do anything. Same with librarians too, and it's actually quite a problem with both those industries where it's so easy just to sit at a desk all day. So yeah, I think there's been a real push for people to get into a little bit better shape and finding out, as you've said, that exercising actually helps you write.
It does. And I actually think of writing and running as having some parallels in terms of process as well. And I don't know what your writing day looks like, James, but for me, when I first sit down, and I will say I'm not a morning person, so
Me
but
either.
I'll sit down.
Yeah, my partner is. She'll wake up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and be like, I'm awake.
Yeah, I'm one of those too. Yeah, that would be my husband also. So thank heavens there's one of us up with a dog at 6 in the morning, and that it's not me. But I find that I sit down and I start writing, and invariably it's a little bit of a slow process at the outset. And then you kind of get going and build some momentum, and certainly some days are better than others, and that's the same with running. But the other thing I find as a runner is that the first kilometer, every time I'm like, oh gee, like why do I do this? This is kind of hard. And then you find your rhythm, and it starts to get easier and joyful. And I had a funny exchange online with a friend recently who insists, and she is a very good walker. She's out with her dog walking quite regularly. But this is another Edmonton author named Natasha Dean, who
I know. Yeah.
We all know and love. And Natasha has said to me before, Karen, I'm really suspicious about this running that you do, because I've never once seen somebody running and smiling at the same time. And so just yesterday I took a picture of myself. I snapped a selfie running and smiling, and I posted it for her. So we have to do these funny, silly things, I think, to connect with other people and to in our writing community, and also to help our writing process in whatever way works.
Yeah. I know, for myself, especially with the pandemic, it was all of a sudden the gyms were closed. It was hard to go places to exercise. So yeah, I think a lot of people I think got into either running or cycling, one of the two, which were nice outdoor things that you could do, distanced, and really fantastic, and then also keep that connection with other people too, which is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Is there going to be a book on a runner, or because there is, right?
There is. It's called Taking the Lead.
That's it.
And this book is really dear to me. And as I tell students and anyone in my writing classes where story ideas come from, and I always say they come from real life and things that I notice. I've honed the craft, I hope, of becoming a noticer, and I'm a lifelong eavesdropper. And for Taking the Lead, what happened for me, the origin of that story was I was running in a half marathon in Victoria a number of years ago, And the race was going really well. I was having a really good day, but I hit that 17-kilometer point, 17 of 21 kilometers. And I think I was just kind of in my own head, and the motion was becoming repetitive enough that I was, kind of doing that negative self-talk, like, why did I register for this thing? And I could just walk off this course. I am so done with this. I'm fed up with this race. I'm, sick of running. I've had it, whatever. Those things that kind of start to happen between your ears every now and then. And I looked over, James, and there was a woman who was vision impaired. She was running with two guides, and one of them, and I'll just show as an illustration, you'll notice here on the cover, there is a tether between them. It's like a shoelace or a cord with a loop at either end. And so the guide has the loop in one hand, and then on the other side, the vision impaired athlete has the loop. And so this particular day, there was a woman who was running a great race, just a great race, really inspiring, even if she, were not a vision impaired athlete. And anyway, I was just so inspired by this woman, and I thought, my gosh, here I am whining, and I can see the road in front of me. I can see the people around me. I can take in this beautiful view along Dallas Road where the race was finishing up, and I have nothing to whine about. and it just sort of lifted me out of my own head, and I'll never forget that experience. And so I decided at that point there would be a running book where my protagonist has to run with a vision impaired athlete. And I have not had the opportunity to do that. In my story, Jonas has to do that race to earn his way back on the track team. He's a sprinter, actually, not a distance runner, but he has to train a vision impaired athlete. I have never run with a vision impaired athlete. I would love to at some point, but what I have done, and this was just one of the literal highlights of my life, is I was part of a push team with a wheelchair athlete, and Raminder was just tremendous and was very gracious about allowing me to join this push team, and I had the pleasure and the privilege of pushing her across the finish line. So once again, another powerful experience. There were tears at the finish line, and just beautiful experience. And that's something I love about running as well, is that runners and athletes come in all sizes and shapes and varying abilities, and all of them have something to offer and to bring to their sport.
And I noticed a connection to writing in there too. When you say that sometimes you show up to the track and you're done with it, you don't want to do it anymore.
Oh yes.
Yeah, talk about that with your writing. I mean, running is one way of getting through it. How else do you? Because everybody has that, right? Like and everybody thinks that they're the only writer who has that.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. Because at some point, as much as we do what we can to build community. We have our writing colleagues we connect with online and, in person when we're able to. And and for me, that community is just so very important. And that is, that's something that I think we have to really lean on. And the other thing I've found when the writing gets hard is I also take some inspiration from students, and one of the best things, especially for me as a former teacher, is the fact that as a writer, I get to go into kids' classrooms, and of course it's all virtual these days, but there have been times when the writing has been going poorly for kind of stretches at a time, and I'll do a school visit, I'll get back among those students, and especially when we were able to do this in real life, it's almost like I could feel those little hands lifting me back up, and just that energy, the emotion, the enthusiasm that comes from students is just so elevating.
That's really inspiring. Yeah, especially because we write for kids.
Yes.
So to see kids engaged and engrossed, and have you? I mean, I'm sure you have, but. Have you had that opportunity where there's one kid that just, doesn't seem interested, doesn't seem, just absolutely, they're there to get out of math. That's why they're at the event. And then you actually engage with them.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's that moment of wow, I actually reached that child. I mean, there's also the ones that you don't, because they are just glad to get out of math, and that does happen too.
Right. Well, and you touched on something that I've thought about, James, in terms of what I I think this is almost what I miss most about doing in-person school visits. I'm grateful we can do them virtually during this time. But something I love about doing in-person visits with the schools is I often build in a question and answer session, but there are always those kids who are not quite confident enough to speak up. And so the session ends and I'm, putting away my props and collecting up my books and getting ready to hustle out the door, and someone will come up to me and say, by the way, I'm writing a story with my two best friends. We decided we're going to do a graphic novel, so I'm writing this story. They're both really good artists, and so they're doing the pictures, and so here's where we're at with it. What do you think we should do next? Like, does it sound like it's okay? And just those little quiet moments of engagement. I'm sure you get this at the library as well, James. Those beautiful moments, like the one-on-one moments with those students who just, maybe the quiet ones who you don't always really hear from. And for me, those are just such beautiful moments. And of course, the thing that happens after that is you then get the teachers approaching you and say, by the way, I've been reading so many middle grade books with my students lately, and I kind of like to write one. So what do you think about this? And so yeah, there certainly is magic to being among our target readership and just being able to talk books with our colleagues and to talk about writing with with students and with other book lovers, and it just always gives us a lovely boost, right? Really lovely boost.
Yeah, and then because we're almost at 11 o'clock, I'd just like to ask you one more question. And what's next? Are you working on anything right now?
I am. I'm working on a couple of different projects, and as you know, James, the pace is, in the publishing industry is fairly slow, and I think it's a little bit more so these days. And so I've been dabbling in some different genres, actually. I'm trying to use this as an opportunity to explore different types of writing. So I've been working on a middle grade fantasy. I've been working on a middle grade mystery, and I started to plot out a teen horror story.
Wow.
So I'm just having so much fun with exploring these different options. And I know, James, you said we're down to just a couple of minutes here, and I'd like to ask you a question back.
Sure.
And that is, I have been so inspired by your books. I know you and Kruth are doing some beautiful projects with your Spartans, and you have another one coming out in the new year, I think, yes?
I do, in 2022. So yeah, Kruth Press, which is a fairly new small publisher in Vancouver. They published 3 Spartans, which came out October 2019, just before the pandemic, so I was able to do a book launch, and then all of a sudden, everything shut down, which was kind of too bad. So we're doing what's called Spartan at Sea, and that's going to be coming out in 2022, and it'll be taking place actually where I live here in Richmond, in a place called Finslow, and it's going to be a modern day parody of the Battle of Salamis, which was between the Athenians and Spartans combined against the Persians. So it's been super fun to write. And really enjoying it, and I'm really excited about this one, actually. It's I was excited about the last one too, but it was my first middle grade, the last one, so I was a little bit nervous about it.
Right.
And so
you're a young adult guy.
I'm a young adult guy. And you kind of get sometimes when you do one type of writing for a long time, you get sort of pigeonholed as they're the young adult guy. They're the young adult guy. And then I didn't want to be pigeonholed anymore, which is actually why I wrote Flying Feet with Orca, because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as the vampire guy. And so actually I really like writing middle grade. I've discovered they're just I liked writing young adult too, but middle grade is really fun.
It is fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is fun. Yeah. And I find I often kind of sit right on the line between middle grade and young adult, and so it's like, okay, do I dial up the sweetness and take down the grit and make it middle grade, or do I, up the darkness and shift this into teens? So obviously you're doing both of those beautifully.
Yeah. Well,
congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. And this is my first parody, so they're actually supposed to be humorous. So which was also from I wrote zombie books and vampire books and that kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden I wanted to write something funny.
Right.
So
Right.
So
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm excited for it. Congratulations.
And thank you for asking. So it is 11 o'clock, so I'm going to say thank you very much to Karen Spafford-Fitz for coming on to interview with a storyteller with Richmond Public Library. You can find her books here at the library, and also you can find her books, of course, at bookstores everywhere. And I believe your website is KarenSpafford-Fitz.com. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So
Yes,
go
it
check
is.
her out, find out what she's working on, and definitely give her books a read. And I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll let you say goodbye to everybody before I stop the stream.
Bye. It was such a pleasure, James. Thank you again. Take care, everyone.